We live?
So,
Wait, are we live?
yeah,
Okay, so welcome everyone to another episode of the Urban Files. This is Chuck and my co-host Max, and Urban Files is a show where we take you through everything about the urban landscape, the living, working, and playing in it, and we really discuss everything and anything regarding cities. So, Max, I know that you, of course, are about to set foot on a great journey pretty soon, huh?
yeah. Like the title says, or our loyal viewer, he knows who he is, would know. My family is about to head off to Taiwan, and we're actually just a little over 1 day away. So it's definitely on the doorstep now. And yeah, it's been, you could maybe even say 8 years in the making, for us to head off on some kind of expat endeavor, and and we are excited and nervous and everything all mixed in.
So that's incredible. I didn't know it'd been that long of a thought process, even so really even preceding, the kiddos and stuff. So that's pretty incredible. So I guess I wanted to see what were some like the core purposes for, not that you really need one to live abroad and stuff like that, but really what are some of your core goals and wants out of this experience for however long you're there?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I'll say it's a lot of different things. As a couple, my wife and I, we've always wanted to spend a portion of our lives in Asia for just our own enjoyment, fulfillment, the experience itself, establishing sort of a network and a base, both socially and also professionally. And so a move to Asia has always been in the works. And that's what I meant when I said 8 years in the making. Just how we've bounced around the ideas of landing somewhere in Asia. And then, with the kids now, on top of that, there was a bit of an urgency to get over there while they were still very young, so that they'd be able to adapt quickly. And we've always felt like putting them in public school in a similar environment to my wife's when she grew up in elementary school in Asia. We felt like that would give them a lot of discipline and self-motivation, and some of those structural things, that would be a good foundation for them moving forward, that perhaps as they get older might not be as great anymore. I'll take Taiwan, for example, since we're moving there. People often say you don't want to go to public school for middle or high school, because then it becomes to be too rigid, too structured, they kind of suck the life out of you, both in terms of the number of hours you're required to put in, and also sort of the rigid mentality that takes away kind of creative thought and all that stuff. So at least from the early years, we felt like they'd get some good out of it, which is kind of similar to what my wife did. She came over to America for middle school, and she really excelled at that point. And so with that in mind, we felt like one of those environments would be good for them in the early years. Also, for them to experience the culture. We have Chinese heritage. The language was very important to us. And so just immersing them in all of that. And then being closer to some of our relatives in Asia for a time period would be nice. So those are some of the things, most of the things that
Yeah.
came together, coalesced for us to want to live in Asia for we're thinking 2, 3, 4 years, something like that.
Okay. Cool. Well, I'm honestly, I'm really, really excited for you guys, and I'm really excited to hear about the whole process of it. And I'm excited for the boys to
Thank
have
you.
that experience. That's really cool. So, I guess speaking a little bit to, on the ground there, how excited are you as an urbanist, which, we are as we produce this content and stuff,
Uh-huh.
to really be in an urban center as dynamic as Taipei. I mean, I think, people in the US might have some familiarity with like, Japanese, the subway system and all that, but just generally, how much more dynamic would you say the urban fabric and vibrancy is in a place like Taipei, even compared to some major US cities?
Yeah, it's hard to really compare. I mean, when you're speaking about the US, I suppose New York is the one fair comparison that
Yeah.
comes to mind. Uh, Outside of that, you don't really have that same level of energy, vibrancy, and density at that scale that Taipei offers it.
Yeah.
Walkability, I think we've talked about this a lot. The big six and maybe a few others can offer quite a good amount of vibrancy and walkability, but it's just another
It kind of
level.
stops it downtown or the core. I mean, like, and I
Yeah.
think that's the thing. Like, even when you think about the surrounding communities of Taipei, like you have Taichung and you have which I think is where TSMC is, and Sim2, and those are just far more magnitudes of order more urban than any
Yeah.
suburb almost in the US.
Yeah, it's Taiwan. I think Taichung is another city about about halfway down the island. So it's a separate urban area. But yeah, where TSMC is like a new district. You could look at it as a suburb. I think technically it's also defined separately from Taipei, if I'm not mistaken. But they're essentially like it's part of the greater Taipei area. They're, a large agglomeration.
I think it's very American of me to
Yeah.
like the metropolitan region
Right.
or whatever, when in fact it probably is a very symbolic entity in its own right and its own urban presence. And I guess also, when you have functioning rail transit, it takes you like an hour and a half to get across the whole island. So
Yeah. I was going to mention with
kind
Taichung, I was going to describe it as being like an hour and a half away, but then I realized saying an hour and a half away even makes it sound like it's right there.
Yeah,
when
yeah.
It's actually a very, very distinct and separate area.
Right. Hour and a half is like a lot of Americans commute out to like outer Atlanta or whatever, right? So
Yeah.
So
Yeah, and like to your question, it's interesting. I certainly, when we were deciding where we wanted to move in Asia, the urban factor was very influential for me in the decision, and for my wife as well, more indirectly because she doesn't care as passionately about urban topics, but she is a big city person and she just naturally gravitates towards that. So yeah, definitely factored into our decision. But then, for the past year and a half or so, as we've prepared for the move, I think that's completely slipped my mind. It's not on the forefront anymore because we have all the practical matters to prepare for. And then once we get on the ground there, getting settled, getting the kids into their schools, figuring out our sort of work life and what that's going to look like, that I haven't really thought about the city and as you're describing it in a long time. And when you mention it now, it does get me very excited. I think
it's an added perk,
Yeah, absolutely. This will be the most urban space, the most urban environment that I have based myself in beyond like a month or two. We spent a little over a month in Mexico City. I've spent a month in New York. So those certainly
have that living and it's everything is at your doorstep.
Right. But those were always very sort of temporary and fleeting. This will be the first time that we're pretty much based in a city that's as dynamic as Taipei is. And I'm sure 3 months in, 6 months in, it'll really hit me that, wow, these are definitely awesome. Different surroundings. Yeah. For better or worse, but I think it'll be mostly better. Yeah.
Oh yeah, totally. So I guess the last thing I really wanted to touch on was, Of course, there's been news of Nancy Pelosi being recommended not to visit, and she did indeed visit, and that led to some, increase in hostilities. So I guess just I'm wondering if that is a significant concern for you. I know we've discussed this previously, but I wasn't sure if there's any insights on how, if that was changing your thinking at all.
Yeah. Well, it's funny you mentioned the Pelosi portion when actually, there's been another congressional delegation visiting Taiwan now, which is sure to spark outrage in China, in Beijing, because after the warnings, after the whole chaos with Pelosi, now the U.S. is going to push it even further.
Defiance,
And,
yeah.
I don't know if you had heard that, but I was just in the
I saw that
24
news
hours.
Yeah.
So, great. I'm hoping it doesn't affect us flying in. That's something we'll have to see, because I do know that some people, I had read about some people who were affected slightly by essentially no flights were canceled, but a lot of them were rerouted and perhaps delayed as well during the first round of drills that China, military exercises that were happening. So this timing isn't a great thing for us. And to the larger point about just any concern, I mean, it's for anybody who hasn't been following for many years. I mean, first you should know that this has been an ongoing tension for a decade, 2 decades, perhaps even longer, to varying degrees. And so, so it's tricky to really know exactly how when somebody should feel. I mean, if you talk to a lot of locals in Taiwan, they don't think anything of what's happening right now because it's just more of the
It's always
same.
been. Yeah.
And that's a dangerous way to think, of course.
Yes.
But that's the prevailing sentiment there. We are obviously concerned, but we feel like it's still at a point where we can head over. We don't need to change our plans, but we're really going to try to be on high alert. And whether that means anything or not, it's tough to say, because once you start to build your life somewhere, it's just tricky.
You get more settled. I mean, because you're not. It's not like you're just going for a trip that you can reset.
And it's not like China will necessarily give us a warning, like, okay, you guys better get out of here in the next 6 days, 7 days. And if they do, even if they did give that warning, it doesn't mean you can get out in 6 or 7 days, because lots of people will be trying to. So we understand that going in. We understand there's this risk that potentially we may not have an easy way to get out if China decides to invade, or just if everything goes crazy over there. So it's a concern, but we'll do our best to watch. We have a close friend that we kind of lean on for her guidance, and of course she can't predict the future, but it's her job. She's an international relations expert, focuses on China, studies the stuff all the time, and she's also a lecturer at Johns Hopkins in the U.S. She's a U.S. citizen, in addition to a Taiwan citizen. So she has no issues with coming to the U.S. She lived in the U.S. for many years, but right now she's based in Taipei, doing her research out of a very famous university there, graduate university there, and she chooses to be there. And we've always said if she decides to leave because she's worried about the situation, then we'll follow behind her. So right now she's still there. She's she's told us that we do need to pay careful attention, but but yeah, she's still there. So we'll head over there. And I think the idea is if we do need to leave, we'll stay in Asia and we'll just go
Right.
somewhere else,
Yeah.
probably Malaysia or Singapore, which were the two other places that we were very close to picking before we went with Taipei. So
makes sense. And I think, I mean, honestly, it's with the type of military scale that would be needed for a large scale like amphibious invasion. I believe, remember, this is from like real life lore, so do that what you will. It is about 3 to 4 times the amount of forces and ships that were in the Allied landing at Normandy on D-Day. So a volcano like that probably would have some type of, even probably months warning signs and stuff like that. So to me at least, and I mean, again, this is coming from someone that may not have predicted that, Russia would have staged a full-scale invasion of Ukraine, but even doing that as you will, I think because of the water and the different challenges there, and also the fact that I think it's maybe in China's best interest not to stage a invasion or whatever military action like this. I'm skeptical that it will happen in the immediate future, but I do also think I'm not the one going over there, so I think you guys need to pay more attention to that than I do, of course. But I hope for the best, and I think you guys can feel good, at least right now, about what you're moving forward with.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, we'll do our best. This is a topic that is very complicated. I've had a lot of conversations with people over the last few weeks, and yeah, I think ultimately what we see is just that nobody really knows, and so we'll do our best to try to look at it from a neutral perspective, without kind of getting sucked into the groupthink of whoever we're with. And like you said, with the Russia invasion or with a buildup for an actual invasion, you would think that you'll see the signs for a while. The only problem is ignoring those signs because you just think that it probably won't happen. So actually paying attention to that hopefully will make a difference for us, if in the chance,
right,
however likely or unlikely that something will happen.
Makes sense.
Yeah. So
all right, well, it was good to hear about it, and honestly, I'm super excited for you guys. I hope it's a smooth flight over there, that you find good, that the boys have good experience with their schooling, and that you guys get to maximize your urban living and experience there.
Yeah, thanks. So this is, I guess, our last show before we continue. We'll continue on, but we'll just next time you see me, I'll be in 12 hours ahead of you.
On exact opposite times of the day. Yeah.
Correct. All right. Thanks a lot. It was fun as always.
Good night, everyone. Thanks for tuning in.